Hello and welcome to Janette's TV and podcast. I'm your host, Janette Burke, and today we're welcoming back Rebecca Eckler, who is a well-known Canadian journalist and best-selling author. Now, before we get to Rebecca and her interview, which will happen in 1 second, I want to remind you that you can support us on Patreon. No donation is too big or too small. You can also support us by buying a Janette's TV and podcast t-shirt or sweatshirt. It comes in your choice of color and size with either the Janette's TV and podcast logo and tagline or an inspirational saying made by me or one of my guests in a previous episode. It's all up to you, but it's very easy to order, and you will find the links in the description below. Now back to my interview with Rebecca Eckler. Welcome back to Janette's TV and now Janette's TV and podcast, Rebecca. It's been
Thank
about
you. I actually want one of your t-shirts now.
Sure. You have a new project going on, which, I mean, last time you were here, we talked extensively about your career and your books, Knocked Up, and your other books. And this time you've got a whole new project going on called our eBooks newsletter. I'd love to hear, and I'm sure my audience would too, what is this all about and why did you bring it together now?
It's really interesting because I actually went back to school to learn the business end of publishing. And I like to say that was not COVID related. That was planned way in advance. Mm-hmm. And that's a whole other topic, being my age, going back to school online. But I wanted to learn the business end of publishing because I thought that's what I wanted to do. I had written 10 books. My latest just came out a year and a half ago, which was Blissfully Blended BS. And I thought, you know what? I want to start publishing people's books instead. So what happened was I went back to school at my age, which was very, very difficult with kids and on the whole online thing. I joke that it literally took me 8 hours just to even figure out how to sign in and get accepted to this course. And so I went back to school to study the business end of publishing. And then I realized how much goes into actually publishing a book and how many books are published every year. And it's something like 700,000 in North America. And I thought, you know what? There's something else that is missing in the marketplace in Canada. Mm-hmm. And I realized quite quickly what that was. And I saw a niche for it. So I created a newsletter called Rebooks. And it is celebrating Canadian female authors. And my tagline or my motto is what's good is red and what's red is good. Which means literary trolls, this newsletter is not for you. If you are a literary person, this is not for you. This is books that are fun, they are breezy, they are relevant, you will relate to them. And they're all books that, because they're not Margaret Atwood or they're not a huge Canadian name, they don't get a lot of press, they don't get a lot of promotion. And so I felt terrible for these authors because I know how much work goes into writing a book and they weren't getting promoted. So nobody knew about them. So unlike any other sort of newsletter coming out from the big publishing houses, mine are like, you need to read this book. It's great. But it just didn't get any traditional publicity.
So speaking of the type of books that you cover, I know there's a wide range of topics. But how do you actually decide which books you will cover? So is there a process involved? Are people pitching you because you are a member of the media? And if so, what's that like for you?
Well, okay, yes. So after the first newsletter came out, immediately I had every single book publicist at the major books publishing houses, the medium publisher, every publishing house in Canada were like, get my book in, I want my book in, I want my book in, because they too, during COVID and the pandemic, there were bookstores weren't open, no one was covering anything but COVID and the pandemic. So none of these authors got any publicity, so no one knew about their books. So I'm not promoting this just came out today. I'm going back to 2019 saying, no, this is a great book. So the process is I actually have to like the book. So all these publicists send me 1 million books, and at the end of the day, I actually have to like the book. So each week I feature one fiction, one nonfiction. I have my daughter Rowan has a little section for YA called Peer Pressure. And I always feature a book in a section called Rewind, which is just a book that I loved that could have come out in 2003. And I still love it. And I'm rereading it. It's like comfort food, like, mashed potatoes or something. And then I think importantly for me, it was important to have a section called Cares, where I always feature a Jewish author.
Oh, and it's a charity, right? The money goes to a Jewish cause?
No, it just, a lot of these books they're just not always about the Holocaust. It could just be a Jewish author who hasn't gotten a lot of press and deserves to be. And also, I also publish books. I also promote books that are self-published, because these people are, where are they getting publicity?
Exactly. Well, they aren't. You're quite right about that. I mean, they're only going to get publicity if they can get on a show or something like what you're doing. But typically they do need a publicist for that, especially if they're self-published. A lot of shows don't want to feature self-published book authors. I'm not one of them, but you know how it is in this business. So I don't have to tell you how it works. I'm more articulating your point to explain it to the audience how it works. So I like the idea that you have this and that you have these different sections. What is it about this particular project that is different from your previous writing style? Or what makes it different? Is it the style? Is it, the fact that you've got these different sections, these different topics? How do you feel it differs from anything you've done previously or anything you've written previously?
That's a very good question, actually. So
Thank you.
Along with promoting these Canadian female authors, and sometimes an American author will slip in if I really love the book, but they always have to be female. And each week I also have something called Prep Talk and something from the Secrets from the Writer's Room, where I am giving back and I'm telling aspiring authors and writers, this is how you pitch a book. This is what you need to get published. I'm sharing all my secrets. They're not secrets, but other authors hold them dear to their hearts. And I'm like, no, this is how I got all my books published. And this is how you get an editor's attention. And this is what this is what I've learned. So I also do write personally every week. The difference between this and what I've always done in the past is this is mine, right? This is mine. I've always written for other people. I've always written for the National Post. I've always written for the Globe and Mail. I've always written for whatever, website it may be. But this is just me being me, totally me. In fact, last week I wrote something about why I'll never date an author based on being in a relationship with an author. And I actually am really candid. Like, he used to recite poetry to my vajayjay, shall we say, and play. So I do share a lot of my life.
Okay, that's
but
interesting.
It's always wrapped around in, the writing experience. I also wrote, I do share my personal life in it, but this time it's me running it, the entire thing. So
for the book authors who are listening today, you just mentioned it about 2 seconds ago, the pitching process, how to get a book published. Could you share maybe 1 or 2 tips on that?
On how to get a book published?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, I learned very quickly that a lot of people, especially during COVID, everyone had a book in them. Every day I was getting 5 people. I want to write a book. I want to write a book. Here's the greatest secret about writing a book. You just actually have to sit down and write it. 97% of people who say they want to write a book never actually finish it. So as for the writing goes, I mean, I share my process, which is I have no social life for 6 to 9 months, and I get up at 5 a.m. and I tell all my friends, you're not going to see me, and I don't see my boyfriends. And sometimes I worry that my children might be raising themselves, but I do get up at 5, and then weekends are 12-hour just writing days. But the biggest thing is you need discipline, 100% discipline. And then, it differs for fiction books. Fiction books, usually editors and publishers like to see the entire book. For nonfiction, it's a little different. And they just want to see a few writing samples, chapter samples, see how you can write. And they want to know what the book's about. They want to know your numbers are very important nowadays. How many followers you have across all your social sites. It's not necessary, but for nonfiction, it is important. And then, a lot of publishing houses now are actually saying you can just send us your manuscript directly. And I think that's because in the old days, it had to go through an agent. So first you would have to find an agent, and finding an agent in itself is very, very difficult because an agent can only take on so many people. And it's difficult, but first just finish the book, I would say. And if you're writing nonfiction and get the proposal together, it's very easy to Google how to write a book proposal and just do it.
What say you to the fact that, a lot of people who write books kind of do it like an extension of their business or their brand, and it becomes sort of like a big business card or a calling card for them more than it is profitable, particularly for self-published. So what do you say to that? Do you think that a book should be written strictly for monetary purposes, or do you think that there's a lot of books being produced, particularly in the self-published arena, that are really more of an extension of a coach or some type of business?
I mean, I think it's like great. I think writing a book is very, very difficult. So I give kudos to anyone who actually finishes a book. And I think if you have a business, let's just say you're a nutritionist, and you have a large clientele, and let's say you're a speaker and you go around speaking about nutrition. I'm just pulling that out. Why not self-publish a book? And when you go on your speaking tours, once the world opens up again, or you hold your retreats, you can sell your books there. It's not just, buying a book in a bookstore anymore.
No,
you can bring it along with you. So it's not the worst idea for people to, in an industry to publish a book, especially if they're considered an expert. That being said, most authors, I think I read for fiction authors, it was less than 1,000 fiction writers in America, in all of America, who publish books, make a living writing. So you're not going to make a living writing. In fact, I think I write about this maybe in next week's. I'm like you, I line up my newsletters ahead of time, like you line up your shows ahead of time, so I actually forget. But you're not going to make a living. And that was one of my problems with dating the author, which was his book advance was $7,000. And it took him he was a slow writer. I'm a fast writer. He was a slow writer. So imagine taking 5 years to 7 years out of your life for $7,000. And where we sort of broke down was, I kind of wanted a baby, and, it's not that he didn't want to have a baby with me, but I couldn't have a baby with this man because he refused to get a job. And most authors I know, and I know a lot, they do have day jobs. And I thought that was quite snobby to say, well, I'm an author. Well, most authors I knew do have day jobs.
Right.
So you're not going to make a
right. So you're not going to retire a millionaire in most cases being a book author, but there's other reasons and intentions for it and other purposes to get your story told, to inspire others to do something or take action or to share an important message around a particular topic. And like you say, if you are an expert, it's good to get that out in writing. So what do you see is like in the pandemic? Have you seen that since you are focused primarily on women writers, women authors, have you seen women wanting, like, craving certain topics that they want to be able to read about or have access to, that they, just to get through the pandemic or just as an escape, maybe because, women are very stressed today trying to balance work with the family and the educating of kids at home and what have you. And there's a lot of stats out there that show that women, are very isolated and very stressed. How do you feel your books, the books that you choose to feature, you can maybe help some of these women?
Well, first of all, the books I feature, I mean, I actually even have a section in there, even though the whole thing is mostly guilty pleasure books. They're beach reads, they're mysteries, they're books that you don't have to think about. And that was one of the reasons I started it, is I saw this niche where, I sign up for all the book newsletters because that's my job, right? Mm-hmm. And I was just getting so sick of people telling me what I had to read. Like, here's 62 books on this you have to read, and here's 123 books. I'm like, well, the average reader only reads about 6 to 12 books a year. And in this one newsletter, you're telling me I have to read, 123 books just because it's celebrating some month. I don't look at the books I choose because of the author. They have to be good books and readable books. And I will say most of them are beach reads. And so what? Like,
but don't you think maybe that's something? I guess my point is maybe that's a good thing because we're so inundated with all this seriousness around us. I think people crave escape, and they maybe can't get the escapes in terms of travel because of the borders being closed and what have you. So maybe picking up a book like that you call a beach read is exactly what they need just to relax.
Yeah, I call it eyeball entertainment. It's the equivalent of watching, a show on Netflix or streaming somewhere else. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, like, actually I had just the other night, a woman talked to me and she's like, I really want to get back into reading. Like, what do I do? And I say, well, don't pick a serious book that you're going to be like, oh, I have to learn from this. I mean, yeah. I consider my audience already, well-read or intelligent people who enjoy just reading for the pleasure of reading and escaping. Like you said, no more, no less. If you happen to learn something, wonderful, but it's not necessary. That being said, I did feature a book last week called Inconceivable, which was by Alex Johnson. And she wrote this book, and I was a little jaded, I will admit, when it came in, just coming from working from a parenting website where I would get inundated with these infertility memoirs. But this one was different because it wasn't only for people going through infertility. She went beyond that, and it described how it is for the grandparents of, the parents of the people trying to have kids and how it affects them. So it was a good book. And she admits right from the start, she's a well-off woman and she could afford surrogacy, incredibly, she had two surrogacies, one in the United States, one in Canada simultaneously. So I was like, this is incredible. So for people who can't afford all the things that she did, she's actually kind of giving it to you for free. She's giving you all the tips for free. So I found that,
that could be very useful to somebody who is really struggling in that area of not being able to conceive a child.
Yeah, and for their parents or their siblings or for their friends to know what it's like for them to go through all of this. I can't see, I don't know. I mean, if I suffer from infertility, I'm not so sure how many books about it I would read just because of my own mental, like I'm going through this. Why do I need to read about it? But it was so good in the sense that it was for the people surrounding the people going through it.
And actually, when you're in a dilemma like that, reading about it can be very therapeutic. it can help you
actually,
to
and the other thing
think
I
out.
liked about it was a short book. It was 200 pages, if even, and it was a breezy read. Everything comes down to a breezy read, right? I don't want to think so hard anymore. We've just been through this terrible, 15, 16 months.
And we're not over yet, unfortunately. It's not
Right.
over yet, right? We tend to think
Yeah.
that it is because we're vaccinating more and more people, or we have one shot. Some of us have two, but we're not through this pandemic yet. We have a few more months left. And who knows, there could also be a fourth wave with the Delta variant. So, I think what you're doing is pretty amazing. It sounds very nice, and I'm happy that you're giving women authors, Canadian women authors, a break who may not otherwise be heard or known or seen or read. So it's quite good. Actually, I
Yeah.
wanted to also mention, since we're on this topic, that you have a contest right now, an actual
Oh, yeah.
publishing contest where someone can get a book deal. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, it goes back to what you were saying earlier. It's very hard to get a book published. I think it's 1%, like one out of every 1,000 submissions get published. And so it's called the Read Books Right Away, WRITE, Right Away Summer contest, where I have partnered with a publishing house, a real publishing house, and the winner will get their book published. They will get it edited, they'll get it formatted, they'll get it in bookstores. They're jumping over a huge hurdle here, which is the slush files, which at publishing houses, finding an agent, finding all of that. I am saying, just email me, info@readbooks. Just wait, what is it? Yes, info@readbooks.ca. Sorry, info@readbooks.ca. Just say I'm in, and then you have the whole summer. And I'm not expecting full manuscripts here, okay? Half a manuscript. If you had a manuscript in your drawer that got rejected, give it to me because I might love it. I think a lot of authors don't realize that too. It's like one publishing house may love it, hate it, and reject you. All of them may reject you. But guess what? There might be a publishing house that loves it. So, so I threw this contest out of there, and right away is sort of a double play on the word right away. Like you are going to have
It's
your
a good
book
title. It's
published
very
almost
catchy.
right away.
Yeah, it's
So
catchy. I like it.
so I'm really looking forward.
I like it. It's very catchy. And I love the fact that you're giving somebody this kind of a huge break like this, because it really is what you just described as a totally amazing once in a lifetime opportunity. And it's good that you're going to give that to somebody who, maybe has been waiting a lifetime for something like this.
I've also noticed that a lot of people send me their theses, and sometimes
Theses.
they're theses. They're from
University. Yeah.
and some of them are really good. I'm like, wow, this is pretty interesting. So I get a lot of that. And like I said, for nonfiction, I'm not looking for entire manuscripts. Just, give me a few sample chapters. Tell me what the topic is about. Tell me why your book is different from everyone else's. But back to your question on like what people are coming to me a lot about divorce. A lot of people are writing about divorce. A lot of people are writing about dating. It seems like it's been a hard year for people to either meet people, and it's been a hard year of people breaking up. So everyone seems to want to write their
memoirs about that.
Memoir.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to ask you one other, a couple more questions just before we close out. You are a member of the media, a well-known member of the media. What does it take to impress you with a pitch? Like, what would stand out for you? What would be a really captivating story that would be something you would say, yes, I definitely will want to pursue this and feature it. Whereas, something that you wouldn't want to. So what does it take to get that hook and angle to you, like impress you enough to want to
like writers who are just publishing to publications and newspapers and magazines?
Yeah.
I think it's funny. I just actually wrote about that in last week's newsletter, How to Pitch. And
I know, I saw it on Facebook. Right? That's why I'm asking you.
And I share my stories, which is, first of all, a lot of people say, Dear Rachel. and I delete,
Yeah,
like immediately
yeah,
delete, right? Bye-bye, because my name's Rebecca, and if you're not gonna, get my name right, then obviously what else are you gonna not get right? But also it just bugs me, so delete.
yeah.
Keep them short. And I always tell writers, like if you're pitching to a website or a magazine, always give the editor 3 ideas, because your chances are higher that they're going to like one of them. Do your research on the site that you're giving your pitch to. Keep them short and simple. And I also mentioned, like, I have this personal 20-minute rule that's worked for me for 20 years. So I don't see why it can't work for any other people who want to be personal sort of journalists or columnists, which is, if I find myself talking to someone for 20 minutes about something, it could be anything. It could be a roasted chicken. It could be why I don't like hot dogs, why I don't wear underwear, whatever it is. If I'm talking to someone about it for 20 minutes and I know there's a story in there because I know it has legs and we're discussing it, I also encourage people to drop into, groups, Facebook groups or other groups, and see what other people are talking about. And if you can see a long thread, there's a story in there. So I also say, if you're reading a thread for more than 20 minutes, there's a story in there. But I have a very different brain. What I think is funny, sometimes other people don't.
Tell me and my audience something about yourself that we don't already know, because this is the second time you've been on the show. I don't want to repeat everything we talked about the last time, but maybe just one thing that we don't already know about you that would be like, something interesting about you that you would like to share.
Interesting about me that I'd like
Or it
to
could be an
share.
accomplishment, could be whatever. Just something we don't know about you.
Yeah, I'm not very good at sharing my accomplishments for some reason. Okay, well, I'll give you a writing one and a personal one.
Okay.
Writing one.
I think you should be very proud of your writing accomplishments and the fact that you went back to school to learn publishing. That's amazing that you did that.
Yeah, that's for another conversation. We need to have a conversation about.
So maybe there's a third time interview on Janette's TV and podcast for you.
Well,
but
it's
anyway,
just weird going back.
just give me two little tips, things about that we don't know about you, that we just something to share.
Okay, so most of my books, for some reason, the memoirs, they always start with some sort of me wanting a one-night stand, or I got drunk and pregnant, or whatever it is. Yeah. My parents, I don't show anybody my books, just the editor. So everybody else reads it, including my parents, my kids' teachers. Everybody reads it at the same time. And that goes for anything I publish, actually. I never tell anybody. And so sometimes I can tell if my parents have read it by the tone in their voice. Yeah, so it's like, but yeah, no, I never show anybody. And that's one of my rules too. Like when it comes to writing, if you really want to write a memoir, the most important thing is to be authentic. So you have to write it as if no one is going to read this, because if you're worried about every single person who you could hurt, offend, they might not take a joke, then you're never going to finish it. So that's when it comes to writing, no one sees my stuff except the editor, and my parents read it, and my friends read it just like anybody else. Even my boyfriend, nobody.
Okay, so basically what I'm hearing you say here is you can't be worried as an author. You cannot be worried about what other people think or what they're going to read or whatever, that it has to come out of you naturally and authentically, and you just got to write and not worry about who's going to read it when and what you're writing. It's got to be from you. Is that correct? Is that what you're trying to say here?
Well, those are the most truthful books, obviously, right? When it comes to nonfictions or memoirs, yes. Like if you're going to tell the truth and tell the full truth. That being said, like really think about it if you want to write a truthful memoir, right? Because you have to think about who it will hurt. For example, after Blissfully Blended BS came out, my ex-mother-in-law, which is my son's grandmother, she has not talked to me since. And I don't see it as a loss, but see, look how truthful I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you really have to think, like some people would care about that. Some people would care what the ex thinks. In my case, I don't. I write from the heart, and I write what the truth is.
And I guess that's
My
what
truth.
makes you so successful though, and why you have such a huge following of people who like your writings and your books, right? Because you don't hold back.
Yes, but I do have to warn people. Like people come to me and they're in the midst of a terrible divorce, in the midst of a terrible custody battle. I'm like, don't write it. I mean, you could write it now, but why are you publishing? Why would you make this worse for yourself if you're going through like a custody battle? It might not be the wisest thing to post on social media that you're going through this and writing about it. It's just going to anger the person. So this day and age, everything travels, but your ex is going to find out that you wrote about it. They
Mhm.
are, right? There's
So
always
think
one person
about
who's
what
going
you're
to tell
doing.
them.
Think about what you're
So,
doing and maybe wait for the right time, like maybe after it's all said and done and the dust is settled, then pull it out type of thing.
yeah, and you might feel differently. You might feel like, oh, I was angry in that one moment, but it's been a couple weeks. I took a walk around the block. I thought, maybe this is not the best idea to share with the world, right?
Mhm.
And people ask me that all the time, like, aren't you scared that your kids are going to read about in your books? And I'm like, well, no, because it's nothing that I wouldn't say to their faces or anybody else's faces. And secondly, they're too busy on TikTok to read. So what can I say?
Yeah.
But a personal thing, I have a funny one for you, actually. Right now, under this dress, for the first time in my life, I'm wearing shapewear. Is shapewear?
Yeah,
Like
shapewear.
ever. First time. And I'm in
Oh,
my
okay.
40s. And I've never tried it before. And I gotta tell you, it's not that comfortable.
No.
And it's expensive.
Oh yeah, it depends what brand you buy. If you're talking Spanx, then yeah, it's expensive.
Yes. And I'm not sure if they work all that well, but there you go. There's a personal thing
Okay,
for you. I'm
well,
wearing
thank you
some
for
kind of
sharing
shapewear I'm
that.
wearing.
I like it to be personable, and I think it's great that you're so open. Rebecca, we are kind of just approaching at a time, so I just want to give you a chance to maybe tell us or say something about the RE books newsletter that you haven't said, something you might be want to add, or at least tell us how we can reach you, and how we can get to read these chronicles.
Okay, so the Read Books newsletter comes out every Tuesday night, and it's free. You could subscribe to it at info@readbooks.ca. And like I said, every week there's a nonfiction, a fiction, a Jewish author, a YA, and a guilty pleasure treasure, I call it, which is we're heading into Real Housewives books here, but they're all light reads and books that you were not going to hear about in the traditional press just
Mhm.
because, but they are all read by me. They're all get my stamp of approval. And I don't consider myself, hoity-toity here, right? That's why I'm like, I'm not a literary snob. I'm going to read what I want to read, and I hope others, see these books that I'm promoting of other Canadians and say, oh, I've never heard about that. And that's the whole point. These are books
Yeah.
you haven't heard about that you're going to hear about, and they're good books,
Okay.
and they deserve
So
to be
one more
noticed.
time, the website or what the link to get involved and to be able to read these um, publications when you put them out on Tuesdays. What is the link again to sign up to get it?
You can just go to www.rebooks.ca and
Okay.
you can sign up there. And again, I also share my own personal journey of writing 10 books, what it takes, how all my book deals were made. Like, I just give it away because why not, right? I'm a woman supporting other women. I'm an author supporting other authors, and I'm happy to do so. I'm thrilled to help other women.
And so thank you, Rebecca, for coming back today and being a guest on Janette's TV and podcast. I think that, you always impart really great info and tips. And I really appreciate the fact that you are trying to help other women. I think it's great that you're giving back that way and you're being supportive and collaborative rather than competitive. It's really nice to see in this realm of the publishing world, and that you have an amazing contest going on that could really give somebody uh, an opportunity of a lifetime. So thank you again for coming. And I want to thank you for being with us today. This is Janette Burke, your host, signing off for Janette's TV and podcast. Please remember to like, comment, and share all our posts with your family and friends. You will find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Vimeo, pretty much everywhere. We even have now our audio on Clubhouse. So it's hashtag Janette's TV and podcast. And until next time, continue to be fabulous.